So if you're watching my video called Percent Intro Part 2, it's reasonable to think that maybe you watched Percent Intro Part 1, but if you didn't, I can give you a quick picture of it. Here was the idea. We're learning to calculate things like percents. Like when you see 32%, when you see a 32%, what does that mean? Or if you see somebody's selling an item at the store for say 20% off, what does that mean? Well, in the previous video we learned that percent really means per hundred. Okay, so if you look at say 32% unemployment, what you really mean is 32 out of every 100 people are unemployed. Well, the big question comes up, how do you calculate 32% of say a certain number? Say you look at some town or some city that's got 48,000 people in it. Some people call that a town. I live in a town of 1,400 people, so 48,000 people doesn't seem like a town. That seems like a city. But if you got 48,000 people and 32% are unemployed, it means they don't have jobs, then how many people really is that? Well, the method we used in part 1 was this. Think of a progress bar that goes from 0% to 100%, and then over on this side, here's 0 people, and here's 48,000 people. Okay. And we said, okay, look, 32% would be right about right about there. 32%. So progress bar up to there. Stop at 32%. And the question is, how many people is that right there out of 48,000? And we learned kind of a cool trick. We said, if I think of this distance right here, how come it's not writing? If I think of this distance right here as a fraction of this distance, okay, then this distance right there is the same fraction of that distance. Well, how does that help me? Well, what we did was we wrote a proportion or a set of ratios. We said, look, 32 out of 100, which is the orange part over the green part, that's the fraction that is on the left side, would have to be the same thing as our unknown number of people out of 48,000. And then we went back and said, look, this looks just like a ratio. If I get rid of this question mark and just put an X there, not a ratio, it looks like a proportion, and we'd solved those for a long time. We'd said whatever you get when you multiply across this way has to be the same thing as what you get when you multiply across this way. So we grabbed a calculator and multiplied 32 times 48,000. Let me just do that over here. 32 times 48,000 is 1,536,000. Okay, that's got to be the same thing as 100 times x. Okay. Then we just said, look, we've been doing stuff like that all the time. If I take my 1,536,000 and divide by 100, I'll get what x is. Oh, 15,360. So that means that in this example, out of a city of 48,000 people, 15,360 would be unemployed. That, by the way, is a big problem. So we've been learning to calculate percents by just writing a ratio. So if I say, hey, would you please figure out what 48% of say 1,600 is? And maybe the example you might think of is maybe somebody works at a bicycle shop and there's a $1,600 bike that you could get, but the boss says, hey, I'll sell it to you for 48% of the cost. But you got to figure out what that is. So what you do is say, look, here's my 0 to 100% on this side. Okay, 48% is going to be right about in here somewhere. Okay, so out of $1,600, how many dollars is that? Okay, so you say, all right, well, the ratios I've been doing before have been 48 over 100 equals my question mark. We'll go ahead and just use an x. X over 1,600. And then we'll solve this like we've done before. We'll go 48 times 1,600 has to equal 100 times x. So let me just write the 100 times x here. And then we'll figure out what 48 times 1,600 is. 48 times 1,600. That's 76,800. Okay. Now divide off the 100 to find out what x is. So divide by 100. We get 768. Well, stop and think. Is that reasonable for that number right there? Well, 48%, it's just a little bit under half. So my cost of the bicycle ought to be a little bit under half of 1,600, and 768 is a little under half. So that seems pretty fair then. Okay? So let's do another one. Let's figure out 32% of 1,400. Okay? Maybe the example on that one might be they took a vote in the city of Waitsburg, which has 1,400 people in it, and 32% of them said that they didn't want to change a certain policy within the city. Okay, so we're trying to figure out how many people didn't want to make that change. So we got to figure out 32% of 1,400. So we'll make a little diagram here. Let's go 0% to 100%. Okay, and 32% would be right about here. Okay, so out of 1,400%, here's 0 down. I'm sorry, out of 1,400 people. How many people is that? So we'll write our ratios again. 32 out of 100 is going to equal x out of 1,400. Okay, same thing. Multiply these two together, and that's going to get us the same thing as if we multiply those two together. So 100 times x.
I can learn to understand you much better if I can get them.
I'm not sure what that was. So 32 times 1,400, 44,800. Okay, divide by 100 to solve for x, and x is 448. Does that seem reasonable for the question we were asking? Well, 32%, that's less than half, fair amount less than half. Half of 1,400 would be about 700, so would be exactly 700, excuse me. And less than that, 448, that seems reasonable. Okay. Okay, well, let's do another one here. Say I've got 59% of 114. Okay, well, if you're watching this with your parents, one of them may, or both of them, maybe you're looking at this going, well, that's dumb. Why don't they just, okay, I totally get it. So if you don't mind, for just a second, I'm going to put a pause on this right here. And kids, just quit listening for a second while I talk to the parents. Okay, look, Mom and Dad, I totally get it. There are faster ways to do this, and I'm about to show them to you. But the reason I had them do the ratios first is I want them to understand what's happening. Absolutely, there's a shortcut. I'm about to teach it, but I don't want to just teach shortcuts to kids instead of having them understand. Okay, so give me a break here. I'll be right on that shortcut, and you'll remember exactly how to do it if you've forgotten. But just give me a bit. Okay, so students, let's unpause this question. And I want you to look at something. Have you noticed that every time we've been taking this thing and say, okay, look, I had my 59, I don't know, right about here, 59%. My 100% was up here. Whoops. I lost it. There we go. My 100% was up here. My 0% was down here. I had 0, 114, X. And every time I've been taking this 59% and writing it over 100. And then over here doing X over 114. So I always get this 59 over 100 and then multiply by 114. Well, here's the deal. I could just take this 59 out of 100 and just write it as 0.59. Okay, because when you take 59 divided by 100, that's what you get. Okay, and so 0.59 has to equal 114 over X. Well, you probably remember that to solve something like this, if X is divided by 114, you can undivide it by multiplying by 114. Okay, so then you end up with X equals whatever 114 divided by, 114 times 0.59 is. Okay, so we can grab our calculator here and not sure why it's so big this time. Okay, and get 67.26. Okay, so 67.26. So that was a way we can get the job done faster. So if you're looking at something like this, 49% of 76, okay, yeah, we could say, look, I used to be doing 48 out of 100 equals X over 76, but, oops, let's call that 48 instead of 49. So we could just write 0.48 equals X over 76 and multiply 0.48 times 76 and get our answer. So the shortcut is this. You can just say, look, change the percent to a decimal, 0.48. And to do that, you always divide by 100 because it's 48 per 100. Okay? Think of the of as being a times symbol. Okay? And then, yeah, just take the 76 and put it right there, 76. Okay? So 0.48 times 76, get your answer. Let's see, where's my calculator here? 0.48 times 76. There's your answer, 36.48, and you're done. Okay. So when you get one of these things, especially if it's something like this, what's 115% of 3,200? Okay. Well, all you got to do is say that 115% really is 115 per 100. So do that division, you get 1.15. Multiply that by 3,200, and you got your answer. So 1.15 times 3,200, there's your answer, 3680. Okay. So the shortcut absolutely is to just say take the decimal, or take the percent, make it into a decimal by dividing by 100, and then multiply it by the amount you're trying to find the percent of, and you're good to go. That works every time. I wanted to show you the way to do this thing without the shortcut so you understood. But yeah, this will work to just take the percent, write it as a decimal, multiply by 3,200, and you got your answer. Okay, that'll do it.